Hey guys. So since this last class was kind of riddled with technical problems, and I'm sorry that ended up really distracting me, I wanted to record kind of quickly some of the areas that I was hitting on, and either I got cut off or I was worried about if phrasing if I went to share screen. So I know I've already recorded for you while you guys were all here, walking through what the problem is going to be that we're looking at. But I was starting to break up when I was showing you guys some examples and I was talking about how I approached a similar problem. So the examples that I have are from like a slightly different take on this project. In the case that I'm going to show you for both myself and for other student work, it was looking at a gig poster. So similar idea in that you're promoting an event, just the event itself is kind of different. So I'm going to show you right now some other student work, and then I'm going to show you how I approached it. And then I've got one other one that I wanted to show you guys today in class, and I didn't get a chance to because of the internet stuff. And that is looking at promoting a AIC group. So in this case, rather than being an event, it's for actually promoting the newspaper, but it's a similar kind of example, and it shows you my thought process as well. So let me do share screen here. So I think you guys got to see some of this, but maybe not all of this. And I wanted to also kind of talk a little bit about how I approached the thing that you have to do, which is to have two images interact with each other. So I'm starting off with Cliff Mon, and one of the things I wanted to mention is in Cliff Mon's example, he still is a great illustrator, and he wanted to draw his own work. Now, most of us, myself included, cannot draw as well as Cliff Mon does. If I did a drawing, I don't know what it would look like, but it certainly would not look like Ariana Grande. So his is drawn, but most of the rest of these are going to show you how to, like, photographs or even illustrations that you get from sites. Again, royalty-free sites can be incorporated. Now, some of these people were actually able to reach out to the folks that they wanted to make an event for. In the case of it was a local club. Or in some cases, there may be for some of these some images that were part of a press kit that they were able to access that were already high enough resolution, were good size, and were explicitly able to be used in promoting the bands. So that was part of their thing. But no matter how you get them, as long as you want to make sure that you have permission. Anything that's royalty free, as long as you follow the instructions in terms of crediting, you can use. If it is something that's copyrighted, you need to get permission from the person who took the photo, drew the image, whatever it is. So make sure that you're not using any copyrighted material in your work. Anything that you make, obviously, you can use. And anything that I have provided for you, you can use. So in this case, he drew his image and he brought that into Photoshop. I think he actually drew in Photoshop because that's what he's into. But he played with text, as you can see here. He was using Sweetener World Tour, and he almost made the text into a texture behind the image that he drew. Also drew these little roses. Now, the other thing in this one that is worth noting is that the way that he kind of deployed that imagery in social media, keeping that main image that he drew as kind of the centerpiece, again, utilizing this diamond, but thinking about what's going to work in a smaller format, but also how, in this case, this is Twitter, the icon image interacts and intersects with the cover photo. So in this case, he made the ticket link information kind of fall off of the edge of the G so that it still looked like when it stood on its own as an image, if someone just clicked it and saw this big, it doesn't look funny and like lopsided, but it looks like it's integrated in part of the composition while still making sure that information you need isn't cut off. In this case, again, he did draw his little sad face because he wanted to look kind of grungy. And then he also was playing with a background that he kind of brought together from a few different pieces. So an example of how you guys could do something like that with the winter festival that we're doing is, for example, you could pull in from someplace like Unsplash, some textural elements of snow, or again, maybe there's like a little, like this little ball here and you want to like put some text in there. But you can take images and have them interact with each other in Photoshop and kind of overlay each other. And again, you can bring down, oh, that's cute. You can bring down the opacity on something to try to like maybe put a texture of some of these leaves behind something like the snow falling, to kind of give it a winter feel, but then you bring everything down so that it's not kind of taking away the attention from what you want it to be. And now go back to the examples. Here we have one where he was able to contact the Monster Cat DJ, well, DJ group actually, and get a hold of the logo. But he was playing with not only making it look like the logo itself was spray painted on the wall, but also he did the same thing with the text as well. Celtic Women, she was able to find press release photos that were free to use as long as you're using it to promote the group. And she actually went in, you can maybe see a little bit here on the edge, and basically cut them out from the background to have them overlaid against the castle or overlaid against her textural background. So you can do something that's kind of more literal like this, or in the case of this A$AP Rocky poster, she was playing with some just stock photography she found of these heads of crash test dummies that had been battered, and kind of playing with it. She had some flames and kind of playing with it as a kind of like a conceptual idea or conceptual element behind the piece. So with that, the kind of conceptual thing, again, remembering that in your case, you're going to be working on a poster for this event, this week-long event that's going to go on. It's going to showcase kind of all of the different classes that we have within our various majors in our area. There might be different ways to kind of approaching that are less literal than, here we're going to have a video show and we're going to put on this play, and we're also going to have some spoken word stuff. We're going to have some design, some photography. Maybe you want to think about, like you're saying, like winter, or like maybe a carnival atmosphere, because it's supposed to be like a winter carnival. So, or a festival rather, it's a festival. So maybe there's like festive things, maybe just end of the semester, something kind of joyous. You might want to think abstractly about how you want to promote this. Esther asked at the end of class, do I have to use Rex? Do I have to use the AIC branding? No, you don't. That's just one option available to you. So similarly, and I think I got cut off on this a little bit, I was trying to show you guys a little bit of what I had done for a friend who was also doing some promotion. And I've got some other examples, as you can see above. I was kind of aware of time. But in this case, I have the Hold Steady. So they are a band. They've got a very kind of nostalgic feel to them. It's kind of guitar driven rock. And they very much have like a connection to kind of 1950s, but like a kind of distorted, aware that it wasn't all nice and rosy. So for example, on the bottom left here, we have Boys and Girls in America Have Such a Sad Time Together, lines from one of their songs. And this is for the Boys and Girls in America tour. And this was some actual promotional material. And then on the right, you had their most recent album at the time. Now, my friend, Lisa Marie, she has a blog, Last Year's Girl. She not only writes about music and culture for her blog, but also for various magazines and newspapers in Scotland. So one of the members of the Hold Steady was doing a solo tour for Ernst Nicolay. And so she wanted to put him on in Scotland. So she come to me knowing that I also liked the Hold Steady. And so I kind of knew their aesthetic. And obviously I knew her and her aesthetic, and asked me to help her make a poster for the event. Now, since it was a member of the band, not the whole band, but people know the name of the band, but not him, we wanted to kind of trade off the imagery from the album, and that fans would be aware from the album, while making it clear that this was something distinct. And she also wanted to kind of start the idea of her having these kind of gig nights. So she decided to kind of brand it as Lisa Marie's Friday Night Speakeasy. So with that in mind, I went off, I made a few sketches for her. So these were the 4 sketches. So again, this is going to be the first of your guys' assignments where you're going to be giving me sketches before going to roughs. And so, you know, how much do I mean? What do I want in them? So here you can see an example of what I was doing. Now, obviously, if this is your first time doing it, I'm not going to say that this is going to take you 5 to 10 minutes. But what I would like is your sketches to take you no more than 5 to 10 minutes each, because you're going to make 6 to 10 of them. And especially if you do more like 10, this should really only be 5 minutes. I don't want you to be spending more than an hour actually drawing. A lot of the time, I want you to be kind of thinking through the idea. Now, you might do that partly through actually making the pieces. So maybe you make one and set it aside, you think about it, you come back, you make the next. An example of that would be here, where I started off with the idea of the speakeasy, being kind of literal about the idea of 1920s when someone would have to go and speak the code word into the bouncer's ear to be allowed into the gin joint. Now, the other thing is that I was posting it not knowing all of the text that I would have. I knew I would have information on the date and time, supporting X, things like that, but I didn't actually have it yet. So I had to kind of have these little boxes that stood in for what that text would be and kind of give myself a sense of where that would land. That's going to help me figure out the composition of the whole space that I have. Because again, this is the space you're using. As I kind of worked through the ideas, I then went kind of backstage. And again, with the I don't want you to take too much time, I wanted to get the sense that this is a cluttered vanity that a performer is using before the show. But I didn't want to draw out all the pieces. We hadn't decided if it was going to be something more illustrated or if it was going to be a photograph. So I added a couple things in. So you got a sense that this was cluttered without having to spend the time drawing everything. Similarly, down here, as I started to kind of go more towards the imagery that is associated with the band and that kind of subgenre, I wanted to convey the sense of this would be the idea of you're on Mulholland Drive, you're looking out over LA and all the lights over LA. I'm not going to draw all of LA or all the lights of LA. So instead, I did this kind of shaded in thing. And when you meet with a client, you can discuss and say, so this is going to be kind of a cityscape with all the twinkling lights, kind of going out into the distance. And then in the foreground, you have a silhouette of a boy and girl in a car, either kissing or about to kiss. And this is where we went back and forth and we kind of talked and we were like, no, the moment right before they kiss is what we're interested in. Or again, a drive-in. And so that kind of still, like, you get some people snuggling up, some people are a little bit, more afraid and they're away from each other. But it would be, Last Year Girl Friday Night Speakeasy presents, and then the other bands, and then the kind of info with the date and time. So we were able to kind of talk through various approaches, and she kind of liked this idea the best down in the bottom left. So kind of looking at that, again, as I was saying, it's very sketchy. It's still, there's a lot of things missing, but you understand how it's going to work as a poster and how it's going to work in that compositional space. So that goes from here to there. We kind of discussed how we wanted to work with somewhere in between photorealistic and illustrated. So again, we've got the boy and girl, the moment before they kiss, that's hand drawn. You get kind of the shakiness of the hand drawing in the hand drawn font, and then incorporated in with some photorealistic things that are kind of treated to kind of play with that interplay. And again, you can see more or less where the text falls in relation to the kind of blocks that I had laid out before. And it doesn't line up perfectly, but you get a sense that is kind of similar. So we're going to be designing for both print and screen. So one of the things we're going to need to think about is kind of how things are going to look in your poster, and then taking that and having it work in social media as well. I'll show you guys some more examples of the stuff working in social media next week. I don't want to try to push all of it today. The last example that I wanted to show you guys, and I just couldn't make it work at all with sharing from Slack, is a little bit close to what you guys are doing. The other class worked on their particular pieces were advertising one of our clubs at our school. So again, I can use this as a way of showing you kind of the thought process. So when I, for example, would approach this problem, rather than I was just thinking about, maybe using some snow or some ideas of a festival, we were talking about the Winter Festival. Here I was saying, all right, I want to advertise the Yellow Jacket. So in here, my first thought was to take the front page of the Yellow Jacket and to play with that, to make a poster that looked a little bit like the front page of the newspaper. So I started with the idea of kind of tell your story, join the Yellow Jacket, Writers Wanted. So these were the first two sketches I came up with. And as I came up with those sketches, I also decided to go and have a look for some imagery that I might want to use inside my poster, because I knew that, especially in this case, I'm doing the newspaper, but they use actual photographs. So in this case, I had gone into Unsplash and I found some photographs that I liked and I wanted to use, and I noted down the site so that that way, if I did want to go back, I could make sure that I credited the person correctly. From there, I was kind of looking through all the imagery that came up for newspaper, and I got an idea of maybe doing something that played with letterpress and like physically making your mark on the world with imagery from newspapers. So I'm going to real quick show you these images to kind of give you a sense of what I mean, because this could be an example of where you want two images to like be overlaid on top of each other. So I was thinking of maybe taking an image like this and overlaying it on top of an image of some newspapers like that. So that way you could play with the way that layers actually like are seen through each other to kind of get this kind of a sense where, and again, like because it's the wood type and it's kind of old fashioned, physically making your mark on the paper. As I was looking through the images for newspapers, though, I also saw some interesting kind of photographs that were taken that I thought might actually give me good ideas for ways I could lay out the paper. So there's one that is kind of a cool photo. And again, I'll switch back in a second to show you. That is a woman kind of floating in the air, holding a paper. I think it's a woman. Anyway, it's a person floating in the air holding a paper. And the idea that like you're telling your story and then you've got like, instead, I would like take out what's already in there and put in the Yellow Jacket as the paper. Or there's another one, which is someone holding a magazine called Good, and it's over a really interesting geometric background. And again, I was thinking, well, maybe I'll take out the newspaper that's in there, put in our newspaper. So that again would fulfill the requirement of having those two pieces interacting with each other. And that could be kind of an interesting way of still kind of talking about it, but in a slightly different manner. So that was kind of how I thought through a similar problem. And let me real quick, I'm going to pause and show you what those guys looked like. Stop share. So on the side, the person kind of floating, it's actually kind of a neutral person floating in the background. And so then I was thinking about putting some type up here and here. And obviously they're holding a specific newspaper, but taking that out and putting in the Yellow Jacket. Or here, it's also like, this is a really interesting background. So maybe again, taking out the paper and here, putting in the Yellow Jacket, and then setting text around it. In both cases, I kind of lucked out because those images are set up in the right way and that they're big enough. So next week, we're going to talk about print versus screen graphics and the fact that you'll need something that's the right size. But at least that'll hopefully help start you thinking through how you can approach the problem, your sketches, and how you kind of work through this kind of a problem. And again, sorry for all the technical problems. And I hope that this is at least goes some way to making up for all of that.